Alright, this is Dr. Mark Barkey at the University of Alabama. I want to make a video here for my AEM 535 students, show them how to install the ABAQUS software. First thing we'll need to do is to get onto MyBama and access our VPN software for the university. As a member of our class, you should have access to the VPN, and it should appear on this tech area on MyBama. So if you click on that and go here to download VPN client and instructions, probably for Windows, you can click on that here and do that, and then install the VPN client. In order to access the Teaching Edition server for ABAQUS, you need to be connected to the university network, and to do that we need to have this VPN installed, and it has to be running before you start the installation procedure for ABAQUS. I've already got mine done, so I'm not going to go through that procedure on this video. Then the next thing we want to do is to get onto our ABAQUS account through the university and take a look at the files that we want to get. Here there's some different folders. Here's for HyperMesh. This is ABAQUS 6.13. That's an older version of ABAQUS that's there for people that need to use it. This is what we want to use today, the ABAQUS Extended Products, in this case 2016. In a future edition of this class, it may be a different year. I believe that ABAQUS is going by years now instead of version numbers. So that's the option for that. So if we go into this folder, just click on it, we'll see some things here. Here's a README file that I have in there to give some installation instructions. Here's the ABAQUS installation and licensing guide that is inside one of these files that we're going to extract. And you'll need this to extract the tar files on a PC, 7-zip. It's a free download. You'll need to install that as well. And then here is the folder, and in this folder are several files. Here's the documentation tar folder, and then here are the extended products. Now ABAQUS is Simulia is a part of a collection of programs. There is FE Safe to do fatigue calculations. There's the ABAQUS Finite Element program. There's a module for optimization and so forth. But all of these things are in here, and depending on how your license server is configured, you may or may not have access to all these different tools. But these 5 product tar files and this documentation tar file is required, as well as the zip file. I have already downloaded these onto my computer, so we'll skip to the next section. Alright, now at this point it's probably worth taking a look at the installation guide. Now, as I said, I've already extracted this for you to see. It is inside one of the tar files, but in order to know how to extract the tar files, we need to look at the licensing guide. So here I've opened it up, and you may want to read through this. It talks about installing ABAQUS. Now, the license server is something that I take care of, and the university takes care of for the teaching edition. You do not need to do anything to install the license server. You will not need to do that, but you will need to install the ABAQUS documentation, and it says you must perform these installations in the following order. Okay, ABAQUS documentation, then the license server, which you won't do, then ABAQUS services. Okay, so read through that. Developer software for ABAQUS APIs. It's the co-simulation components and that. And then ABAQUS CAE, Interactive GUI, also the command line interface to ABAQUS solvers. Okay, and then it says important, you must always install both the ABAQUS services, the solvers, and ABAQUS CAE. They cannot be installed and used separately or individually. Alright. So I'll let you read through the rest of this guide. But the next thing that we need to do is to install 7-zip. Now, I have included a version of it in the folder that I gave to you, but if you need to find it, you can just do a quick Google search for 7-zip, and you can download it directly from the organization. It is freeware. Okay, and so there it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this. I believe I already have this installed on my computer. but we'll go ahead and start it up. Alright, so now it says gonna need to restart your system, complete the installation. Do you want to restart now? Now you would go ahead and hit yes and then continue with the next step. Since I already have it installed, I'm not going to restart my computer and interrupt this recording. Okay, so now that we have the tar files and the 7-zip software, we need to download and extract the ABAQUS media. So here's what we have. We have these different tar files. Alright. And they have to be uncompressed and combine their contents before running any of the installers. So we're going to create a directory into which we want to extract these archive files, and for example we're going to use c/unload. Okay. On a Windows platforms, download all the tar files to a single folder, navigate to this folder in Windows Explorer, select all the tar files, and then with all the files selected, right click on the selection and choose 7-zip extract here. So we're gonna do that next. Okay, so I have my tar files in this folder now. Previously I had some folders, but I got the files. I had grabbed the wrong folder off of my portable hard drive. So now I have these tar files in here, and what it says to do next is to right click and 7-zip extract here. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so it brings up this window and it makes this folder, and then I'm going to do this same thing for these next 5 files. See, I have them all selected, and when it does that, I believe it will combine the folders. If you do them individually, you'll have to copy them over into the folders and get them in the same place. Let's look in the documentation first. That looks good. And I'm going to pause the video while this continues to uncompress these. Alright, so that looks like it's done. We're going to go into the extended products and see we have these different folders, 1, 2, and 3. Let's take a look inside them. Alright. Okay, that's Tosca. I think that's the optimization program. And there's FE Safe, that's the fatigue evaluation. Going back to our PDF document, for the standard ABAQUS only media, the contents of your unload directory should be shown below. Now, we have those other programs, but see here it's got the ABAQUS standard, explicit, CFD solvers, the APIs, the license servers, which you will not need to install, and the ABAQUS CAE interactive GUI. Right, each subdirectory contains an installer. Each installer executable installs different components. For example, to install the Windows version of ABAQUS services, you need to run the following setup.exe file. Alright, so 3D Experience, ABAQUS Solver, Windows 64, setup.exe. Alright, well what we're going to do is we're going to install the documentation first. So I'm going to go in here and inside the one, and there's a README file. Let's see if that has anything interesting in it. Volume 1 shows what's in Volume 1, 2, and 3. The documentation. The recommended order for installation is as follows. Okay, so that's kind of important there. So we're going to go into the documentation. Let's see, extended products. Oh, I don't have the documentation folder here. I'm going to have to grab that. Oh, there it is. Doc Sim Products. let's look in zero data. These are different operating systems. There's AIX, there's Linux, Mac, Solaris. If you're on a Windows computer, you're going to use the Intel. And let's see. I have to look around here and make sure I grab the right one. Okay, so for the documentation, we're going to look in ABAQUS and FE Safe documentation. And then there's a separate for iSight and Tosca. So let's go in here. And we'll try setup.exe. Now if you need to see the extensions on files, you can do that. Let me show you how to set that up so you can show these extensions. Right over here, this is Windows 7 that I'm using. It should be similar for other operating systems. If you go to Folder and Search Options, under View, you can get in here, you can show hidden files, and you can uncheck Hide Extensions for known file types. So if this is checked, see how this says Setup and this says Setup, you may not know which one to click on. But if you uncheck this one, then you can see this setup.exe. Alright, so this is ABAQUS and FE Safe documentation. We're going to click on that. We have a window that pops up. And hopefully this will start our installation process. Okay, here it is. I have two screens, so some of these pop-ups show up on my other screen. Alright, we go through and you can read this license notice and hit next. Gives you a little warning there. We don't really need to view the installation licensing guide. And hit next. We're going to do HTML and PDF documentation. And this is the name of my computer. That's fine. This should be the name of your computer. When that pops up, just hit next. And here I've already installed ABAQUS. So it says a previous release of ABAQUS was detected on this computer. Would you like to install ABAQUS 2016 documentation so that the previous release and the current release are served simultaneously? I'm going to select yes for this. Now if you've not installed ABAQUS before, you may not get that pop-up. Alright, so this has all the information for it, the required and available space. Now I'm going to hit install. It's going to be a ABAQUS web server. It's a web server, but it's not. It doesn't necessarily have to have access to the outside world. So it's like you're accessing a web page, but all the web pages are right on your own computer. So it's not like someone else can access your documentation folder unless you've made that available specifically to the rest of the world. Right, so while this is running, I'm just going to pause this, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, so that documentation set is installed. While we're here, let's go ahead and install the other set of documentation for iSight and Tosca. And here it is in this folder, and we're going to hit the setup.exe for it. Now I got a firewall notification here going to allow the access, and here is the installation directory, and I think that's fine, so we're going to hit next. Alright, again I'm going to pause this video while this installs this documentation. Alright, so now that one's done, we're going to close this out. Now the next thing we want to do is to get into our products directory. Okay, SIM. we have these 3 folders. Now, remember, according to the documentation, number 1 is for the Abacus. We don't need the license servers. And 2 and 3 are for the extended products. Let's take a look at this README file and see what we need to do next. Alright, so we got the documentation. From Volume 1, licensing, we don't need to do that. Abacus solvers. We're going to go into Abacus Solver Platform 1. Okay, here's 3D Experience. Alright. Now we have Windows. I have Windows here. And there's the setup. So this should start the setup of the solvers. It's a little bit different than it used to be. Again, we have a firewall alert. And a little warning, the procedure has changed. You should read the release notes and so forth. We hit continue, and then it has this window, and please read the legal notices in the documentation. We're going to hit next. We're going to use the default for the installation directory. We need to kind of keep this in mind. I think it's going to ask us for this a little bit later on. And these are the solvers. We want them all. We're just going to hit next and then install. Alright, so that is done with the solvers. I'll close this out. Well, let's go back to the README. Alright. Next, Abacus user subroutines and CAE APIs. So we're going to go in 3D Experience Solver, CAE 3D Experience. Okay, so let's go back here. CAE 3D Experience, Windows, and we're going to set this up. Okay, again, it's got some kind of firewall pop up here. Same warning, things have changed. And we can go next. We'll use the default and hit next and install. Alright, now that one's done, and we're off to the next one. Then we're going to go in the CAE folder. And we'll choose the default. And get it started. Alright, now it says specify the location of your Abacus solver installation. Now, remember, this is a thing that I said we're going to need to keep this in mind. And I think we have it in its default spot. But let's browse for it. So we're going to go try to find program files. Dassault systems, simulation services, and let's see, let's back it up one. If I highlight this and select this folder, I think that's what we want. Okay, now please provide the target location for the CAE commands directory. That should be okay. But if we want, we can browse just to double check. Let's try this. If we get an error, we'll come back. Okay. Now here's the server, and for this I am going to give you a server by email, and I'll type this in, but we want to select the FlexNet server. Right. Since this video is kind of public, I'm not going to put this information here, but I'll send this out in an email, and we'll take a look here in just a minute. Oh, and at this point I do want to remind everybody that you need to make sure that you are on the UA VPN that we talked about earlier. So you need to do this at this point because it's going to look for the license server in this step. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I brought it up. We're going to connect. And what goes in here is your password that you use for MyBama. Okay, so I put my license server name in there and it accepted it. Please enter the URL for ABAQUS HTML documentation. And I think we're going to hit next. Let's go back for a second. Please enter the URL for ABAQUS HTML documentation or the base installation directory for the PDF documentation. If the documentation has not been installed, please leave this field blank. Alright, so we're going to have to remember our computer that we used and put that in here. I'm going to pause the video for a second and look up that information. Alright, so if you remember at the beginning it came up with our computer name, and so I'm going to put that name, and just like it is in here, with a colon in 2080, that's the port number, slash V2016. In my opinion, this really ought to be auto-populated with the default, but here it is. We need to type that in. If you forgot your computer name, what you can do is you can get in here into the control panel, okay, and look at the computer name right here. Alright, so we're going to try this, and then we're going to hit next. Alright, please choose your default ABAQUS working directory. I like to have an entire drive that I use for that. Alright, so I'm going to choose temp. And then install. Again, I'll pause this. It's going to take a little bit of time for all this to install. Alright, so after a while it'll complete. It says verification has been completed, and you can take a look at the results in this particular folder. I'm going to hit continue. And the installation program is finished installing ABAQUS CAE on your computer, and we'll close this out. Alright, so let's see, we've done these. Let's take a look at this associative interfaces. And if we go into this folder, it has an interface for ProE, CATIA, SolidWorks. If you use those, you may want to install those. I'm not going to bother with it at this time. And then extended media volumes 2 and 3. We're going to do eyesight Tosca and FE Safe. So we'll go through and go ahead and install each of those. I don't know if we'll use these for the class or not. But we'll use the default installation directories. FlexNet server, and we'll put in the server name that we did earlier as well. Alright, so I put in the license server computer name, and the default port is 27,000. So I put that in there under the port number. Now it's going to need the documentation for iSight. So let's probably write in here, so let's go ahead and find it. Alright, there it is, B418 doc. Alright, so now we'll go to the next one, Tosca. Let's use the default location, and we'll select, let's just select them all. Alright, specify where your Abacus solver executable exists. Simulation, now it says compute services, but let's try services, simulation services. 2016 Win B64 code bin ABQ launcher.exe. Let's see. There it is. Specify ANSYS solver. Now this is, I guess if you have these other codes installed. Now I think the only one that we might have is the FE Safe. And it's not jumping out at me right here. We can probably search around a little bit more if we needed. I'm just going to hit next and let's see what happens. Okay, it gives me a problem for an empty path name. So let's go back and let's just do the default Abacus interface. Please specify the location of your custom v6 environment file. I don't know if we have one set up yet. If CAE has not been installed, please leave this field blank. Let's see, maybe we've got one in there. When I'm going to find the SMA folder in the site, and let's see if we can find custom. Here it is. Okay. Okay, if ANSA has not been installed, leave it blank. And we're going to do the FlexNet. And again, I'm going to put in the license server name. Now there's a little more field down here. License server 2 and 3 are redundant servers, and we don't have that. Alright, so I'll put in the license server name and then I'll hit next. Alright, now it wants the documentation. We've installed it, and I believe this is what we need to do. Here's our computer name. Again, I believe the port number was 2080. We need the version 2016, and then we're going to put in the rest of this here and retype it in here. And let me just double check to make sure I have everything spelled correctly. Alright. Where would you like to create the product icons? Okay, we'll put them in the start menu. I think that's okay. Select your solver interfaces. Let's try Fluent. I don't have Fluent installed, so I don't know what's going to happen. May not like this. It's giving me a warning here. So at this point, I'm just going to hit cancel. Alright. And FE safe now. Hopefully that'll install for us. It's in folder 3. And let's just do this default. All these components. We're going to do the default. Network, and it's academic teaching. Nope, we're going to go FlexNet. We'll go user directory. We'll just do the defaults here, and let's see what happens. Alright, so it's taken a little while, but we're ready to finish this up. Alright, and so with that, we should have everything installed. Let's see if I can start it up. Now this is coming up on my other screen. There's an ABAQUS 2016 documentation. Alright, and so that should be here. So there it is. Update information. You can read those release notes. And then let me see if I can find the CAE icon to start it up as well. Okay, if you have Windows 7, if you go look under All Programs, you need to go scroll down to Default Systems. and then click on ABAQUS CAE. Of course, you can make a shortcut to your desktop or something like that. Let's see if we can get to our license server. There's some firewall alerts. We're going to allow access. Okay, and there it is. We'll cancel out of that initial window and bring this over here. And here is our ABAQUS CAE 2016. Alright, so we were able to go through that and install it. Now for me, this ended up taking maybe a couple of hours, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get this all sorted out. Particularly if you need to download those large tar files that we had at the beginning.